Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Quantum Leap Season 2, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think it's so interesting. The moment Ben showed up where he showed up, I was like, are you in Salem? Close enough. He's in a town called, was it Middletown? But it's like in between Salem and Boston. But I was like, seems like this is probably going to be around the time of the Salem witch trials and stuff like that. So I was like, I was like, wait, isn't that in the 1600s? And which it's like specifically 1692. I think the Salem witch trials happened a little earlier. I think they were talking about how because that ends up coming up in the episode because it's like, oh yeah, in Salem they hang witches instead of burn them and stuff like that. So I wonder, was that depending on the town, or maybe even depending on the year of how they handled witches, so on and so forth, right? But I was like, wow, isn't this the furthest he's going back? Because before now was like 1800s, right? In season 1 when he went back to like wasn't the town he in called Salvation or something like that? It was the kind of, I guess, pseudo Wild Wild West that he was kind of in. So I want to say it was like the 1800s, but I mean, I guess it's like when you go into the future now, I guess that's kind of expanded the ranges of what the quantum leap can take you now. So, but either way, he shows up in town to save someone named Goody, who, like, the person he leaped into is Elizabeth, her servant. But it turns out Goody's husband died, and now there's whispers amongst the town that she's a witch and she's responsible for her husband's death. I was wondering why the actress who plays Goody looks so familiar. Her name's Madeline Horcher. I think the thing I probably best know her from, if you've seen the show Big Sky, she played Paige. I was like, why does she look so familiar? It never would have registered in my head if I hadn't looked that up. Also, another person I recognized was one of, like, the friends. I don't think the character has a name. I think she's just called Maiden. She's Maiden number 2. But the actress's name is Ruby J. She played the oldest daughter on the show, The Unicorn, if you've ever seen that show. So bummed that show got canceled. But anyway, like, that was probably, like, the other person also the magistrate, I recognize that actor, too, because he's one of those actors where you're like, oh, I've seen you in things. Wasn't he in the show Numbers? Regardless, I'm going on this huge tangent, but nevertheless, obviously it's that sad situation regardless of, whispers go around, people get inside of their head believing a certain thing and they just can't let it go. For Goody, it is a situation of people you thought you knew, this small town that's all you've ever known, turned on you. People you thought were your friends turned on you. It's not just her, too. Like, obviously, what was it? The magistrate's son, William, ended up passing out because it turns out he's got the same illness as Goody's husband who died from it. So it seems like, okay, so there's some correlation there. William passes out and Ben performs CPR. Problem is, it doesn't exist yet. So it's like, oh my God, you would think that'd be a good thing, but it's like, to them, it's like, oh, that's a display of witchcraft. It's like, well, aren't witches supposed to be evil? Why would a witch save someone's life? But I guess the argument, I don't know, like, it's interesting that William didn't suffer any ramifications of, like, oh, don't you, like, could he have come back as the devil or a demon spawn or something like that? Like, that never correlated, but it's like, oh, you brought someone back to life, you're a witch. No questions about the person who got brought back to life. Like, maybe something's wrong with them. Like, that's so interesting. Because, once again, witches are supposed to be evil. They're supposed to take life. Why would a witch save a life? That's where I'm like, that's what. But also, like, it's like, once again, the hysteria of once you've kind of got swept in that moment, you don't want to listen to anything else. You're stuck. You're very stuck in your ways. Which, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of parallels you can draw in many capacities. Obviously, a running theme in this episode of, like, oh, like, is the element of being afraid of what we can't explain. Because, I mean, a lot of what Ben is saying to them seems so, like, wait, that's crazy, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to people. So, not only is Goody on trial, so now is Ben, and then Morgan tries to defend him, and she ends up getting put on trial, so all three of them are going to burn at the stake. It's either, hey, admit your guilt, and you can repent, yada yada, so on and so forth, or if you don't, you can die a witch by burning at the stake. Because normally they hang, but in this, the magistrate's eyes, like, no, they have to be burned. That's the only way you're going to cleanse them. Ben tried to defend himself. Luckily, he had Jin there, which, I mean, I do appreciate her kind of playing a little bit of his lawyer in this regard, being like, hey, plead guilty. It's like, all right, the last time you dealt with the law situation, you had Jin on your side, so. Which I should also note, I love the whole thing where Jin immediately grabbed the thing to go into the chamber, and Ian was like, what are you doing? You went last time, it's my turn. I'm like, I love that we're fighting over it. I get it, it's supposed to be in rotation, but it's still hilarious that they were kind of fighting over that a little bit. And, you know, it's like they kind of looked at Addison to kind of split the vote, but it's like, hey, don't look at me. I'm not supposed to even go in there, so it's something for you to figure out. And just Jin had to reluctantly give in, and Ian's like, cool. There's nothing digitally we can find about this time and era, so you're going to have to, you know, do it the old-fashioned way, go down to the library and look some stuff up. So it is interesting that Ian Wood kind of tossed the manual, even more manual labor in this regard of like having to kind of do it old school. I love he ended up passing that on to Jin, but Jin's suggestion was, hey, plead guilty, you'll actually get to live. I mean, there's like an 80% chance you'll live, but the problem, and same thing for Morgan and Goody, but the problem is they would lose their homes and everything that they've kind of built for themselves, because Morgan has a store and stuff, but it's like all that would be taken away, but at least they'll still have their lives. But it is that thing of, right, why should you plead guilty for something you didn't do, and why should you suffer the ramifications, the consequences? Because it's like, because even Ben's like, right, if we plead guilty to being witches, what will happen? It's like, well, and the magistrate was like, oh, there will be consequences. And Ben was like, no, all right. And he calls up William, because it's like, oh, Ziggy says there will be like a 93% chance William will help. But in the end, he turns on them. He was like, no, they're witches, you know? So now they're going to burn. And now obviously the trio kind of turns on each other to some extent, because even Goody's like, you're the one that I saw you whispering with the magistrate. It's like, yeah, I was defending you. He was accusing you of witch, because she's like, I don't know if your conversation with him is what jump started all this. No, it was already kind of in the works. He already had his suspicions about you. But I thought it was kind of this powerful moment too, where Morgan was like, yeah, you went with the herd mentality. For the first time in your life, you've had to think for yourself. Like, you and your friends have never really known me, and I know you whisper about me. And that's the sad thing of, yeah, like, your friends have taught you what to think and what to hate, and now those same friends are hating you. Like, you're on the other side of it, because you've never questioned anything. You just always kind of, it's that herd mentality that the entire town has, and it's like, yeah, you never went against it, and the only reason why you're going against it now is because it's against you, and you know you did nothing wrong. So it is that kind of complicated conundrum. I do feel bad for Goody, but it is that thing of, yeah, this kind of opened your eyes to a lot of the ugliness in this town, like things that you would never think too much of. It's not until you're in that position yourself that it kind of makes you have a different perspective on things. You're like, oh, I've never viewed things this way before. So they luckily were able to escape, because Ben was able to distract. Well, I don't think this was the plan initially. It was like, hey, the guy like get in his good graces by bringing up, hey, you're going to have a child. I wonder how he's going to feel about that. I mean, to be fair, luckily Morgan was there to back him up by being like, oh yeah, like she bought ginger, so the ginger root, that means like she most likely is pregnant. Was able to kind of play into that. And because it's like, oh, he believed his wife was barren, but the problem is, like, he was like, oh, you're trying to tip me, like, the magistrate told me, like, the devil would try and tip me, so. But Ben with a plan B of, like, cool, I'm this close to you, and stealthily take the keys, and then we're gonna run. Problem is, Morgan ended up taking off on her own, because, well, she has no loyalty to this town, and it's like, yeah, we're in this together, but the moment it's like, oh, I only have one of the horses because they took one of my horses away, and that's not going to be enough to carry 3 people. So you could have at least come back, and Ben would have probably been like, all right, you two go, I'll try and find another way. I could have seen that going, but no, Morgan took off. But understandable. She's always been an outsider in this town, and she has no loyalty to them, so it came into, self-preservation mode, which, is this interesting parallel where Morgan did what she did, and the town's kind of doing what it is. It's like, there's a parallel that can be drawn there. It does suck, though. She come back to her shop, not only was it torn apart, they took her money. It's like, well, I guess they're like, well, she probably got this money by ill-gotten witchcraft gains or something like that. I mean, it's like, no one thinks it's wrong that you just busted up her shop and you took her money just because she's a witch. Or it's like, well, they're probably like, we can do more with this. I mean, granted, who knows? It might not have been a town decision to take her money. It might have been someone in town like, oh, I found this money, and let me take it and pocket it. I did love that Goody was like, Elizabeth, it's like, you've been at, Well, Elizabeth is the person. I keep saying it, but Elizabeth's the person Ben's in. That's not Goody's name, is it? No, okay. I thought I was right. Goody's real name is Bridget. I forgot. Either way, but it's like, Elizabeth, you're acting a little more cunning lately, and you've been not really acting like yourself. Are you a witch? It's like, you can tell me. I won't tell anybody. It's like, we are being accused of being witches right now, so I did think it was kind of interesting that she did decide to put on the witch hat, because it's like, oh, because they were smelling the sulfur, and they're like, oh, maybe we really are all witch, because Ben's like, oh, because we're kind of potentially like this hallucination, like, so that's why we're smelling the sulfur, because that's supposed to be representation of like a demon or the devil. But ultimately, William ends up saving them. It's just the reason why he didn't stick up for them in court, in particular, didn't stick up for Elizabeth, because right, he was scared. It's his dad, and he's kind of fearful of standing up to his dad and going against what his dad says, and he then did, and Ben tries to tell him, like, it's okay, like, stand up to your dad and tell him that you don't agree with like a lot of this stuff. So that Goody and Ben were home free, but it's still that thing of she's leaving behind everything she knows, but like, she'd have to start over, and all she's known is her town, and like, how do I start over somewhere else on my own too? But they hear Morgan got captured, and Ben wants to go back, because it's like, right, if you do this, because all you're going to do is hold on to that anger and bitterness, and you don't want that to kind of consume you, because she would have that in her. It would fester in her entire life. So not only would we, because also you'd come to regret it, knowing like, hey, not only did you leave Morgan to this, if the town stays the way it is, if it doesn't change, eventually this will happen to other people too. And all of that registered with Goody, so she decides to come back. I had skipped over, but I also love Ian doing the non-conventional stuff in this episode, where they first were trying to do a seance to reach their grandmother, Dorothy. And it's like, I love Jen being a naysayer. It's like, all right, what did Dorothy say? And Ian's like, well, I can't reach it now. Your cynicism ruined the connection. And then later on, Ian's looking at these astrological like papers from back then, being like, okay, Mars was in like retrograde or something like that. It's like, it's so interesting that, well, I guess it also makes sense that but it's so interesting. You would think someone like Ian, who's so scientific, you wouldn't think they'd have that approach, because it just doesn't always correlate in that regard, because you feel like Ian would be too logical, and same thing for Ben would. I mean, but I guess it's like that kind of all gets thrown out the window considering everything that's kind of happened. But even then, they can probably still explain things from a scientific perspective. But Ian did have that perspective, the same thing as Ben, of like, right, magic is just science we don't understand yet. So, but it turns out that it's going to rain pretty soon, so it ends up being Addison who ends up going into the chamber. I thought it was kind of nice that she had this conversation with Magic, interestingly enough. I didn't even think about that when he was like, yeah, it could be kind of Magic, and he kind of smiles, it's like, considering that's your name and everything, but she doesn't know what to do about the whole Ben situation, because it's like, right, like, she feels useless. I went from being the leaper to the hologram to being like the worst intern. It's like, you're not the worst intern here. Remember home dude from R&D? I think it was like someone from R&D. But it's like, yeah, like, she hadn't figured out where things kind of stand, because like her role for such a long time felt defined as being the hologram, to be there for Ben, and now it's like, I don't even have that. I don't know what my role is. And Magic talked about going off of his sponsor, and they kind of talked, and it was basically a conversation about alchemy, about not just, magically transforming one thing into another, but also like from using that concept, metaphorically speaking, to turn something bad and spin it into something good. It's like, right, you can't control how Ben feels or thinks about the situation, but what you can control is yourself, having a better understanding of yourself. Obviously, Magic, being, an alcoholic, and kind of working through that with his sponsor, like, that's where that all kind of spun from. And obviously Ben was happy to see Addison, so it's like, right, it's like, right, it's going to rain, so Ben kind of just like held off on them killing Morgan and everything, and was like, right, let's and let there, like, if you think we deserve to be burned, let God decide. If you say this is God's punishment, let there be rain. Did it 3 times. I was like, of course it's not going to rain when you want it to. But then it does. So it's like, oh, what does this mean? And now it's like, oh, the magistrate was wrong. We should burn him. I'm like, Jesus, people, did we learn nothing? And Ben's like, whoa. We got to stop burning people we don't agree with. It's like, yes, the magistrate was wrong, but like, what is consuming all of you guys is fear. You're scared about something that's going on. Understandably, the drought, people are dying. But then like Ben's like, you smell sulfur, right? I'm not crazy. I thought we smelled it before. And I figured, especially because if you go back, Goody had said when she tried to like get her husband, and like in court she was like, I tried to get my husband some water, but it didn't seem to make him any better. I was like, it's something wrong with the water, isn't it? And it turns out that's the case. There's sulfur in the water. Their water's contaminated. That's why people have been getting sick. There was a rational explanation for it. So they end up taking the charcoal that's a byproduct of the pyre they were making to burn the witches, and they were able to kind of obviously clean the water, because that's exactly what Morgan was doing to the water. Which obviously, because even I was like, how are you going to, even when this is all resolved, that's going to be a bit awkward, because it's like this town did try to kill all three of you, so that's going to be a little complicated. How do you go back to a normal life here? But it's like, right, we all made a mistake. Let's change the way what this town can be. Who or what is this town going to represent, and who are we going to be? So, because Goody told Morgan, at least you have one friend here, because Morgan felt like she had no connection to the town. She didn't really have a friend, but it's like, yeah, we came back because you do have at least one friend. So it all works out in the end. It's still kind of an awkward thing to kind of continue going forward after that. But what was interesting, though, is this whole situation did lead to Ben and Addison rekindling things. Not in a romantic sense, but I also love that Ian was like, oh yeah, I saw that kiss with Hannah. Like, we got to talk about that. It's like, no, we're not going to talk about that. It's like, oh, so Ian wasn't the only one that saw that. I'm assuming Addison saw that. Well, I don't remember she was there at that time when I don't remember. Obviously, it's been a little while since the last episode. I don't think she was. They never cut back during that scene, because while they were kissing, Ben leaped. So we never got context or anything for, what the team was seeing back at HQ. But Ian saw it, so I don't know if Addison did as well. But either way, Ben talks about him and Addison, and it's like, right, things are still awkward between us. Obviously, Addison knows him well enough to know that's exactly what he's going to say, but it's like, right, I let fear control me. I was afraid of what being around you would have done to me, but I don't want to be that angry and bitter person who doesn't want to talk to his ex. I mean, once again, it's a different situation. Ben's in a very complicated space of like, it's not like Addison did anything wrong. She didn't, it's just a sucky, unfortunate situation to be in. So out of any situation, it is a situation that you could most likely be it's a situation that would call for being a little more amicable with your ex than in another situation. But it's like, yeah, I don't want to be angry and bitter and hold on to that, because I don't want to see what my life is without you in it. So we can at least try and be friends. So that's kind of a neat situation to end on. So it's going to be a little awkward figuring stuff out going forward. But now the whole team's in full rotation now. So I'm curious to see if Addison's going to go back full time, or will they. Obviously, it'll probably vary from situation to situation. There will probably be times, once again, they'll still be tagging out mid episode. Like it went from Ian to Jen, and now to Addison, and so we'll probably get more of that going forward. Not unless it ends up being Addison who takes over the main duties. We'll see how that all plays out. We also got this little update at the beginning of the episode with Rachel saying, like, right, the system is set up so that her boss won't realize nothing's going on, so they could track Ben without the data going to her boss. Like, I'm so curious to find out who her boss is. I think I talked about it previously. It's like, her boss has got to be, it's going to be some actor we recognize. Like, it just feels like it's going to be, maybe not. Maybe it might be an actor that's well known enough that maybe I'm just not familiar, but I get the feeling like it's probably going to be an actor. I'm like, oh my God, they were cast as so-and-so as Rachel's boss. So I'm curious to see where that storyline goes, because that seems to be our overarching situation. Obviously, it's all about getting Ben back home, but there's so many interesting threads. It's like, well, trying to figure out Ben's situation, and also like the span of time he's able to go through has massively expanded. I mean, it already was kind of in that weird spot because once again, the whole point was supposed to be you're only supposed to be able to leap in your time frame that you live. That's only like all that the years that Ben's been alive. Like that should be the only time frame that he's able to go. But obviously that changed even last season because like obviously the whole point was building up momentum so he can slingshot himself to the future. That was the whole point. And now we're seeing the range expand even more. So we have that element of it. We also have the whole Hannah of it all, because I doubt it's the last we've seen of Hannah. We'll see. But also this overarching thread of like Rachel's boss and what they're planning on getting out of this. It's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.